Hi everyone for this night edition of Guy with a Scarf. I have the pleasure to have with me, I think from Los Angeles, Tom Kuhr.
Definitely from Los Angeles, but having spent a lot of time in Europe. My name is Tom Kuhr. I've been working with computer tech, software, and SaaS companies for about 30 years now. So I've got a long history of the evolution of monolithic to personal to SaaS-based programming and AI that really has evolved as industries have evolved. Most recently, I was the Chief Marketing Officer at Greenfly, which is a fantastic sports technology.
Yeah. So, but that was your first sports tech adventure, or you've been in sports tech before?
So I actually worked with a football, soccer-oriented company, 2008. So that was my first entry into sports tech, trying to cover the world of football in a social media perspective, from a social media perspective.
Cool. So the reason last week I called you and say, hey, do you want to come on A Guy with a Scarf, is that I saw you wrote, I think with Unofficial Partner, a cool article, long form, which is, I love long form, to be honest. Even if I understand it, if you're a growth hacker, you may not be a big fan of that, but still, I love long form. What I found fascinating is that finally, and it's something I'm also trying to do, someone was talking about not the big strategies of the big sport companies, of the big media companies, but someone was talking about a bit at the level of, the vendors. So from like, you've been in a vendor capacity, if you want, I think,
yes,
in the last years. I've been all my career. And normally that's nobody wants to talk about it because there is competition. You don't want to share your secrets, or I don't know. My perception is that we should talk a bit more about, as vendors, what do we see? What are our clients doing? And very often it's a B2B2C thing, because you need to think the fans, the sport organization. So it's a quite sophisticated environment. But I don't know if you share the same impression.
It is. So a lot of my experience recently at Greenfly was selling to sports entities, leagues, teams, federations, but also to brands who are sponsoring these entities. And we found that sometimes we had to do some B2B2C, right? Because the sports entities were trying to take care of their own internal constituents. So it gets pretty complicated when you get into an industrial ecosystem like sports. Other industries are a little bit more straightforward, but that's why sports is so exciting and interesting, because there are many different perspectives on the same games.
And very often, reflecting on what you said, I found myself thinking, oh shit, I'm really doing something useless. I mean, not in my job, but as an industry, you think, health or things like that, especially during the pandemic. And then you think that, okay, but everywhere, so everything we do is where people have passion, emotion, they're happy. Sometimes I'm a Torino fan, not always super happy because we normally don't win a lot. But I mean, in the end, I reconsider after 35 years. That's not so useless, I think.
I'm sure you have some other favorite teams that you can support when Torino's not doing well.
No. We are. It's a fate. I don't care. I'm fine. You become stronger. Dunque, so let's go to, and we do something unusual. I just want to go through this article that you wrote, which is 10 buying trends shaping the sports business. And if you agree, let's go quickly through the 10, right?
Absolutely. So
what do you mean by that?
I want to say everything's really changed since the pandemic, since COVID. Sports especially has been going through a lot of changes to become digitally savvy, digitally native in some cases. Before the pandemic, digital was an add-on. There were a few social media people at most sports organizations, and that was a nice thing to have. most of the effort was really put on, streaming or video production of some sort, right? That was the majority of revenue for the bigger leagues. But now we're seeing the cycle has really shifted to, especially with younger generations, towards short form media. But also, like you said, it's not long form anymore. It is short. People want little bits here and there. And that's actually changed organizations and changed the way that they're buying. And in many ways, the changes in greater society have moved into the sports buying cycles. And we're really seeing a consumer-driven buying pattern, or more consumer-like than it has been in the past, where it's been
and why do you think more transparent? Sorry, why do you think purchases are more transparent? In which sense?
It's more transparent because it's not just top down anymore. It's bottom up. So it's the people that are using the software have much more say in what software they want to use, or technology in general, as well as the fact that you're seeing software and technology that's actually cross-department. So it's got to be a lot more collaborative, because the buying process has to be a lot more collaborative, because the software itself is actually collaborative. It's bringing siloed departments together, which is overall great for the organization, but it really makes the sales cycle a lot slower. But it also makes purchases much more, or purchasing decisions a lot better for the organization, because more and more people have the ability to weigh in.
You have buy-in before you really buy. So
Exactly.
And you can still make mistakes, but I mean, it's a more conscious ecosystem decision, if you want. I agree. I agree on that. But that's what yeah.
But it makes things a lot longer, right? Because you're convincing more people. You've got to sell it into different departments, and that's the vendor, but also the vendor's advocates inside the deal. And people are doing their own research. Up to 70%, and this is pretty much across all industries, of research for technology is done without talking to a vendor, right? It's talking to peers, it's being online, it's doing online research, it's reading trends, listening to podcasts like this. People are trying to find out where to focus because there are so many choices out there. So with that, it really does elongate the sales cycle.
You don't think it's also due to kind of I don't want to say fear to invest, but maybe because, there's a bit of crunch on profits and trying to spend wisely, and maybe a bit of more short-term approach compared to long-term. So big decision, or you really need to understand why you're doing this big decision, that maybe you will see the benefit in few years or in 2 years, which is a long cycle for today's business. Do you think there is a component like that or no?
I think that there is especially when you're dealing with multiple departments, the fear of being the one who's really strongly in favor of something, right? Because if it doesn't go right, there's certainly a personal aspect to having your friends and peers and colleagues say you made a bad decision. Right. So it's much more cautious that way. But going back pre-pandemic, sports entities haven't had, outside of media production, haven't had a really strong IT department. There hasn't been a really strong buying methodology for technology in general, like a Fortune 500 company would have. And so that lack of structure is now just pervasive with more people. So what I actually am seeing is a little bit more structure being added, more formal RFPs for things, but mostly with the bigger leagues, not so much at the team or federation level. And that should, in essence, make it less of a personal decision, more of a structured team decision.
Yeah. Which, I remember the years where I had an idea, I would propose it to a client, we would be live in 1 month. Clearly not the case anymore. I think because everything is more mature. But it's connected to what you said, to be honest. I love that period. Not always. Sometimes we develop for 2 years. So, but I love that period on the other hand. What do you mean by integrated solution? So
having before, with less budget control, with less structure in the buying process, different departments could buy different applications, different technologies, and use sort of a best of breed approach. When you're starting to look at a collaborative buying process, it's harder to do that. It's harder to say, I want to put this one in and this one in and this one in. You really need something that's going to both fill in the gaps if it's a workflow type process. And you don't want to have 10 different vendors all, competing to, because then you do get feature overlap as well. So companies that are coming at it from an integrated approach, we can do this, and then we can do this, and then we can do this, and help you through this whole evolution, this whole change management process. We can help you get better over time, really have an advantage to point solutions that just do one thing.
I've seen it both on the sport organization level. Many years ago, we were replacing a scenario, and we found 70 vendors. And I think we were like 1 + 2 small, replacing 70. On the other end, I think it happened also so even from vendors, this is true. If a vendor has a size, like I would say between, more than 300 people, there will be this function buying whatever, a Datadog, the other one buying for maybe the same reason, but different people, especially if you talk to techies, they always have the best tool in mind and they don't want to change it.
Yes.
And I've seen it totally. I completely agree with this.
So unless there's an absolutely must-have feature, it makes more sense to buy from a vendor that at least is thinking of, value chains and integrations to other products, even if they don't do everything themselves.
Yeah. And in terms of value being quantified quickly, in which way you mean that? Makes sense. I think you really say, oh, I disagree. No, I think that's. But how do you mean this?
Again, before a sort of structured buying process, value is in the eye of the beholder. Oh, it's going to make my job easier, or I think this is really cool. Now it's actually, how does this impact our bottom line? How do we prioritize this against all the other initiatives we're trying to work on? Give me a number. Give me, is this a €100,000 improvement? Is this a €500,000 improvement? Is this a €2 million improvement? It really helps the company prioritize if they can calculate how this is going to affect them even before they buy or install the software. So coming up with a return on investment is really key.
And I think you're talking about both top line and bottom line. So I can make more money, or can
absolutely, or both. Some software is really made for saving money. Some is made for opening up new opportunities that weren't there before. And some is just really to help you continue to stay relevant so you can keep doing the same business.
Yeah, absolutely. But this is, to me, super connected. And I don't remember all the 10 points, so I hope I don't anticipate anything. To becoming a bit more, I don't want to say rigorous, but focus on, and I don't want to use another 3-letter acronym, but total cost of ownership, TCO, sorry, total cost of ownership. Because very often you compare to things, say, yeah, but with this one, we need 3 people. With this one, we need 50 people. Or we need 3 people, and then we're planning, I don't know, a managed service. So that's normally not super simple. It's both the vendor and the client that have to trust each other, collaborate to understand the real TCO of something new.
That is very true. And that's one of the reasons we're seeing a trend in moving to software-only, video management, really, because it's so much less cost-intensive than buying and maintaining hardware, which goes out of date.
Yeah.
So a lot of things are moving to the cloud just because of that.
Yeah, and security is a must. I was lucky enough to, I don't remember now, the last 3 years, maybe, or 4, working with the chief security officer. That was also someone I would call at 10 p.m. because I found something that I was not super safe. I didn't feel safe, so it's also a friend. And I've learned a lot. And I think, this is I don't think this is, so it's true. I don't think many people really understood it and are valuing it as it should. But that's my, if you want, a bit more anecdotal,
This is where I see the IT department really stepping in and really starting to put their foot down and saying, you really need to have some certain certifications, or at least have security policies. They need to be clearly outlined. We need to be able to audit them, and actually writing that into contracts. So people are definitely getting really serious about this kind of thing. It's not across the board, but from a vendor perspective, it's really a must-have. You really can't be a great vendor and not pay attention to this.
It isn't. So two things to comment on that. One, and maybe I don't want to open a wider point, but as a company, it becomes part of the culture, because it's not only the software tool that has the right. It's how you behave. It's a bit more, especially if you're in some sensitive positions. It's really delicate. On the other hand, I wanted to ask you if it's a must-have, but it's also a selling point, or just you need to have it, doesn't differentiate you?
It can differentiate you, but I think the real key here is especially if you're dealing with fan data at all, having a fan breach is a severe brand value hit, right? So it's not just, we have a legal liability to the government to maintain GDPR. We have a liability to all of our fans, everyone who supports this club and spends all of their money. We really don't want to have a data leak or misuse their data in any way. We have to take that seriously. So it comes from the organization side too.
Yeah. This you have to explain. I may see something, but explain, please.
Absolutely. So in selling a technology worldwide, it's really easy to say, everyone's going to use our technology the same way. But localization is really the key to globalization. You really need to make sure that your technology fits into different markets. And some markets are fairly similar, like the Euro market is fairly similar, but there are definitely cultural differences. What I see is a lot of American companies go and say, I'm just going to go sell to Europe. I'm going to open one office and we're going to be able to sell everywhere. And it just doesn't happen that way, right? It is, in sports, there's still relationships that need to be created and maintained. There are absolutely different cultural and language issues. Not everyone speaks English. And there are different data and privacy concerns from region to region too. So it really makes sense to have, doesn't even make sense. Sometimes you will not be able to sell software unless you have local representation, whether that's an affiliate, a partner, a value-added reseller, or staff in that country. Your brand needs to be represented in the way that the country or region is going to want to see it. With that, you can grow into global organizations, but most sports organizations are very regional by nature.
Yeah, it depends. I've worked with international federation, and I've worked with leagues which are normally in the past were more national. And you immediately, if you compare US and EU, leagues are really functioning very, very, a bit less now. They're a bit, but it's so different, the way you sell rights and blah, blah, blah. The way the leagues as to manage the relation with the clubs. I mean, clearly US and Europe. But the problem I've seen, without mentioning names, seen American companies going in India and selling zero. Not good companies, zero.
Yeah.
Because they don't understand how India works. I mean, you need it's a different market.
It is a different market.
We could do another session with maybe some CCOs together to expand, from if you're from the US or Europe, how do you see MENA region? How do you see APAC, which is not one market clearly, because you have Japan, you have Australia. So it's so fascinating. I'm happy I've never been a CCO, but because of the many roles I had, because that's really tough. You want to sell globally, I think.
But it is a puzzle, and you have to be able to focus on certain areas before you move on to another area, right? Because it's expensive to set up shop in every single country. Yeah. So how do you do that in a meaningful way is really, really going to determine how your brand's perceived.
Yeah. So difficult to disagree with this one.
This one is, industry agnostic. So cloud is the way people are moving. There's no debate anymore whether it should be on premises or in the cloud. But that's what makes the security aspect of all of this so much more important, right? Because the vendor has to protect the data because they're managing the cloud instance, not the buyer of the technology.
One thing that I absolutely agree. The one thing that I think we have learned is the cloud is not magic. So if you don't understand the no, sorry, especially in terms of cost. So if you don't understand how the elasticity works and you don't design it architectural wise, you don't plan it, you don't operate it properly, you can spend a lot of money for nothing. Or
Absolutely.
the moment something scales, you're not prepared. So I think this is like CTO 101, but yeah, I think for non-CTO execs, understanding that, that's something you need to have people that know how to use a cloud. Otherwise, it can be a total disaster.
Yes, I can't agree more with all of those points. The great thing about the cloud is companies are able to iterate and create better functionality so much faster. So it's really to everyone's advantage to be using the same server-based platforms.
Yeah. These again, I'm not reading the small text, so I need an explanation. This I can agree, but maybe I need to understand it first. I don't know what you mean exactly.
So, coming from media, you've been following all of the trends in cord cutting and AR and VR and all of this cool stuff that's coming out. What I see is another wave of really cool stuff you can do, but are they ready for prime time? Are they ready for mass distribution yet? I would say not quite. I think we have another round of iteration before these things really start to take off. And broadcast TV isn't going away. There's different ways to take a look at it. There's different ways to measure it, but the core broadcast is really, an important part of sports, period. There's ways to slice it and dice it and consume it differently, but without that linear broadcast feed, whether it's over the cloud or on broadcast TV, all of this other stuff is still pretty early. So we're going to see a lot of trial and experimentation, which is really fun and really cool. But I haven't seen even teenagers saying, well, I have to have this in VR, otherwise I'm not going to pay attention to it, right?
Yeah, so depending on, you're basically touching a nerve, because that's one of my frustration in, okay, obviously it's not personal, but one of the failures, because the moment, if you want linear broadcast TV, non-interactive tools, so the moment we started putting video on digital devices, this was like, for me, we started before, but 2007-8, I started working with NBC Olympics in the middle of Manhattan, 30 Rock. And we had the first video backend that was able to do DVR. It was Move Networks. Then it became Silverlight, etc. And it's the video that we kind of know today, adaptive bitrate, etc. And we immediately started to synchronize data with that to create these rich experiences, then multi-video. So it was like amazing. And I always had this, the things that I want to invent, the next thing that everybody wants, like the scoring clock in soccer, in football, in the UK in the 70s. It was not there before. It was a huge revolution. There was fans protesting, to be honest. I don't know why. It was really not taken. But imagine, that's such a small change, but it really changed the way, if it's not there, you think it's a mistake. Other things that are not interactive, but that came into C is like now swimming without the lane, the flags and everything, or the record. There are certain things that you put in that are really, okay, everybody understands it, everybody wants to use it. And my failure, I think, I don't want to be too much at the center of this, but that we couldn't find a way to make some innovation in interaction, in their interactivity with the video, become popular and become familiar. I think so. This is completely true, but for me, it's something I'm suffering from. Sorry.
I think AI is actually going to make a big change here, because all of a sudden you can analyze the same play, the same game from different perspectives. If I know all about football, I don't need to see a virtual reality of what offside means and see where all the players are. But if I'm just trying to learn the sport, or a new fan, I want to really understand what everyone's talking about, what the commentators are talking about. So I could actually show how this player moved and how he was coming back from offside. Like there's a great way to get more people involved in virtual experiences, get more people involved in the sport itself by teaching them as games are going on, which I see as a huge opportunity. But that, you can't do that without, instant replay and instant decisioning on the part of the technology. So I think we're on the cusp of that. But I guess the take home here is, if you've got a virtual reality or AR or any other fan engagement immersive platform, keep pushing it, because there is no standard.
Yeah, I agree. This one, I think I wrote strategy papers on this one. I was trying to push it in every corner of the organization and the people I met. So even to startups, I would say, show me a front end. I'm sure you have a back end. Show me a dashboard. Otherwise, I don't even talk to you.
Right. All of these platforms that are being purchased are creating tons of data, or they're opening up new worlds of data. So without being able to say, here's how the software is performing, and here's how my team's performing, or this league's performing, like that performance information is really what you need to talk to your boss with, right? To talk to the management team with, to say, here's how we're doing, producing what our joint goals are. All of that is really critical. And we've seen other industries really adopt this, and it's mandated. And I think sports is lagging a little bit in this area, but it's becoming more and more important very quickly.
And also, I think I don't know what was the first time I heard the sentence, data, big data is everything, data is petrol, whatever that they use. From there to, starting to collect the data, having a lot of data and bragging about it, some vanity metrics, then trying to make some sense of them and then make them actionable. I think it's almost like the point before, it's still a long way to go, especially on the actionability of the insights. So it's clearly, data, insights, action. So it's a long process.
Yes. So being able to make recommendations is really the end goal, right? But that's a lot of trust in both the data and in whatever mechanisms making the insights. So
the last one is
a human function, and that's something that AI is not going to solve anytime soon.
Yeah. And this is the one that I normally would leave to my commercial team colleagues, but I'm sure you know more than I do on this one.
Yeah, I think as the cloud and SaaS in general have become more mainstream and are mainstream, buying departments, purchasing departments, procurement is much more comfortable with regular payments to vendors. And so being able to be flexible with stepping into software rather than coming up with a big price tag all up front makes a huge difference. Being able to create a quarterly payment system or provide predictability in how much this is going to cost over 5 years really makes a difference in how quickly an organization will consume it and use it. If it comes with a high overhead, there's a big gap between the realization of what the software can do and where we're starting from. Sometimes you can't overcome that, right? So making it really flexible so it grows over time is really key.
Yeah, because one of the things that I always found fascinating, also not super easy, is really, obviously price is compared to value, right?
Yes.
And in theory, it should be more transparent now in some way. I have the impression, or at least the pricing structure should be more transparent, right? So I'm buying something that is recognizable and I pay every month, and if I want to do more, I need to pay more. So I don't know. Do you think it's an easier discussion? It's more, forget the pricing level, which can be a long negotiation, but are the pricing structure more standardized and understandable from both ends?
I think when they're outlined in a good agreement that they are, so that the organization knows if they move to this level of usage or this many users or this much, whatever it is, they can expect and plan for that transition, right? You're providing a look into the future for them, especially over a fixed length contract or a longer length contract. And that's really important. So I do see vendors doing that. I don't see every vendor doing that. I think some vendors are purposely trying to obfuscate and obscure their pricing, which doesn't leave a good taste in people's mouths.
No.
Like, no one wants to be told in a year that their price has doubled, because it just is. So attaching that to value and attaching that to growth and attaching that to really joint success is a really good partnership system, right? We're going to make more money as a software vendor when you succeed. And until you succeed, we're not. And I think that's really a fair way to do business.
So absolutely. And normally again, because I was not directly, CCO, I always focus on our client success before thinking, and someone else was thinking about that. So you need both, but this fact that they understand that you're trying to build something with them, so it's a true partnership.
Yeah,
it's at least in my experience has been a criteria for the long-term success. So having clients for 20 years and things like that. On the other end, I've seen through the years certain clients, when I don't know if it's an ego thing or it's trying to squeeze partners, vendors too much. I think that's super. If you're doing something critical, it's super dangerous. And the problem is, where is the limit of squeezing? Because then it becomes dysfunctional, and that's something I normally didn't appreciate, even if it was not directly related to what I was doing every day.
Yeah, and sometimes that's how procurement departments are rewarded, to squeeze everything out of a vendor, and that's not setting up a great relationship for success either, because they're actually working against the department that wants the software, because the vendor's not going to go and do them any favors if they're being squeezed.
I just thinking that there is the good thing of streaming be such a fragile ecosystem, because everybody, I even created if you want a John Oliver style real website that is called streaminglivesportisnoteasy.com. It exists, you can try. And everybody failed in streaming, right? Like Amazon, YouTube, Netflix, everybody live streaming, especially live streaming, and normally sport. So maybe there is it's a good lesson for people that you can go to a certain limit and then things fail. Because we were used to, basically, even if inside in all big sport events, we knew, can I say all the shit we had and how we solved things 10 minutes after start or 10 minutes before. So I don't know, that was my experience. We never failed like big, but from inside, all the dirty things that you do to keep things up when it's critical. But on the other end, with streaming, you can really fail, and fail can be, sometimes not lethal for business, but really, really bad. So I think that's a lesson learned from both ends. You need, as a vendor, to make sure scale, security scale, these things, functionality, I hope you're doing it well, but scale and security are the things that you really can kill you when you go live, not before. On the other end, the more you put together an ecosystem of vendors that don't, like the integrated point that you had, they don't really work well together, and you squeeze everybody. And then when the crisis happens, it's not only on the vendors, and not because I want to be on the vendor side, but I saw it and I think it's dysfunctional.
Yes, for sure. So,
sorry, a long sermon, and no client will ever hire me.
I think being a good partner, if you're always just thinking, how can I be a good partner to this company? How can I make sure that I'm helping them succeed? And if they have the same view, it's going to be a good partnership. So,
yeah. So we ended the panelist. I hope some people reach this point of the video. I think it's something that is not very often discussed. I'm super happy with this episode, to be really honest.
Great. Well, I really appreciate you helping me walk through it with your audience.
Yeah, thank you. And it's a good conversation that I think we should have more often and in a bigger group then.
We should.
Va bene.
It would be actually interesting to get a sports organization's perspective on this as well, because they're
maybe I will cut the last part for that.
And I'd be remiss if I didn't thank Unofficial Partner for allowing me to write a byline on their blog.
Absolutely, absolutely. So thank you, everybody, and thank you, Tom, for being so patient going through this with all my blah 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 anecdotes and things.
That makes it interesting, Carlo. That's why I like it. Comes with the scarf, right?
Thank you, ciao, Tom.
Ciao.